What if I told you that your current understanding of how sex works with men is actually ruining your relationships? What if I also told you that a change in your approach to sex can actually be the difference between sex making you feel used and making you feel like it's the best part of a committed relationship? If you want to learn how to make a change in the most important part of any romantic relationship, then join me on today's show where we'll be discussing what I would tell you about sex if you were my daughter. That way, sex can stop being something that traumatizes you and start being something that makes you feel safe and connected to the man that you're in love with. Because we're talking about sex, one of the most important parts of any relationship, we're also going to get spiritual. You might not necessarily be a religious person, but there is a spiritual aspect to the act of sex. And I have to mention this because it's so important for us to be of the same understanding here. You are opening your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit to a man and receiving him into you in the act of having sex with a man. It's so important to understand that because when you understand that and you understand that he's taking something, then you also have to ask yourself a question. Well, if he's taking something from me, what am I giving him, right? You are giving him a little piece of you. See, when he conquers you, so to speak, when he inserts himself inside of you, I know I'm getting a little bit graphic, but there's no way for me to talk about this without getting graphic, right? But he is also receiving life and energy. There is life existing in your womb, and there's also life existing in your spirit. And so now that he has had you in this intimate space, and he's had you the most vulnerable that you will ever be of all time, there is a lot of power that comes with this. And just like they say in Spider-Man, right, with great power comes great responsibility. So as he now is gaining a lot of power in this dynamic and in this relationship, there then becomes a choice. See, as you give him something, I know that you're receiving from him and you're opening your heart, but you're also giving him what we describe as your gift of life, your gift of energy, and a little piece of you. He now gets to decide, what is he going to do with that gift? Is he going to receive that gift from you and cherish it, take care of it, nurture you, grow with you, protect you, provide for you? Or is he going to take that gift and disregard of it? And see, this is a very important thing to understand. See, you also need to take into consideration this such important aspect to the experience. You have something to give him that he desires. In their experience, right, they have an innate desire to hunt for this gift that you have in your already existing possession. And their desire to get that gift from you is what pushes and motivates them to use tactics, to use smooth talking, to use lies in some cases, to use manipulation, to try and get this gift from you. I'm going to circle it so you don't forget it here, right? This gift is so important because what you have to understand is you're already walking around with this gift inside your womb and inside this region, right? It already exists inside you. You were born with it. But you have to understand it is something that the men desire, that they want from you. But remember, like I said, right, you're opening your heart, you're opening your soul to a man and giving him this gift. So if you're giving someone a gift, let's even kind of take this away from the spiritual sense so I can reconnect with a lot of you and gain some understanding in terms of what we're talking about here. If we're talking about gift in a literal sense, tell me in the chat, are you going to plan to give a gift to someone you don't know? Or are you going to structure your life where you're giving gifts or planning gifts for people who are important to you in your life? So if you think to yourself, if I have a gift in my possession in a just more general sense, I'm only going to be planning to give a gift to someone I care about. Why would I be giving gifts to people I don't care about and I don't know and are strangers to me? And we're acknowledging that in this scenario, when we're talking about the spiritual realm, that you have a gift already existing within you that the men desire to take and to conquer. Then you have an understanding in the same sense that I can't be giving that gift away to any guy that I come across. In fact, it's quite the contrary. Because I have something so important existing within me, I have to be very, very, very careful that I only give this gift away to someone who shows me that they're worthy of that level of investment. If you meet a guy from the very start, you have to understand that the dynamic and the leverage, the negotiating power is the heaviest in your favor when we start a relationship from the very beginning. So those of you who are still in your dating phase, what I want you to really take into account is that you should actually be your happiest in realizing that your life is at its best, or your ability to have a good relationship is at its highest at the beginning of the relationship, because that's when you have all the bargaining power. That's why I drew what's essentially like a seesaw here, and the sex is outweighing the commitment here, because your leveraging power is so heavy in your favor at the beginning that you might not even realize that you're walking around with all of this negotiating power when you meet men. See, when you want things and you need things and you want to ask for things and you're searching for answers, you can use this negotiating power to get those answers. But here's the best part. You don't even have to end up giving the man sex in the end. All the time that you spend building up to this process where the men want to sleep with you, all the experiences you'll have with him, all the learning that you'll do, and we're going to talk about learning in a little bit, right? All the questions that you're going to ask, which you should be asking. If you join my show, you know how important it is to ask questions. All the observations that you'll make, all the analyzing that you'll do, right? In order to properly decipher, what does he actually mean? What is he saying? What does he actually want here? What are his true intentions? Who's the actual person that he is, not the fake person he's showing me? All of this that you will do while you have all of the negotiating power and all of the leverage, you can experience all of that and then come to the realization that you say, this is not a man that's even going to offer me commitment, or his version of commitment or being committed to me is not what I'm looking for, right? And so I'm not even going to exchange my leveraging power, which is sex, to him, knowing that what I'll receive in return is not even the answer that I'm looking for, not the dynamic that I'm looking for, not the person that I'm looking for. And see, the craziest thing about this is that men will give you a lot and do a lot for you in this beginning stage while you have all of the leverage. So what I want to kind of reshape your mind around is stop thinking about sex as something that you need to give to men in order to keep them interested. It will never, never, ever work like that. Okay? I'm talking to you as if you're my daughter. Okay? It will never work like that. You will never keep a man interested in you by giving him sex. And you're also not going to magically, bring his interest up in you from the floor up to the ceiling just because you give him sex. It does not work like that. What I want you to do is spend as much time as you possibly can with your leveraging power and your negotiating power, your bargaining power, to understand who this guy is, understand what he's about, and understand that if you do give up your bargaining power, which is sex, and I'm specifically talking about sex for the first time, if you do end up giving up that bargaining power, are you even going to receive anything that you actually want in return? And if the answer to that question eventually becomes no, then you don't even bother giving up your bargaining power. You might come to a place in your life where you start thinking, if I can't, beat these men, maybe I'll just do the same thing as them and join them. You know the saying, if you can't beat them, join them. So you start to think to yourself, the best thing for me to do as a woman is to do like the men. I'll sleep with whoever I want, whenever I want, however I want, and I will, this is what you'll convince yourself of, take my power back. Because you've convinced yourself that you can be more like the men by just changing your mindset into dealing with things and approaching things like the men. Because you're like, if the men can do it, right? They're just silly men. I can do it too. In fact, I can play their game one up. Because as I'm sleeping with whoever I want, whenever I want, because I'm in power to do that, they'll be thinking, oh, I'm like one of these other girls and they tricked me and they got something from me. But what they won't realize is I actually wanted to do that I'm the one in control of my body, my soul, and my spirit. And I'm the one that went and got them and slept with them for my own pleasure and my own enjoyment. Ha 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 ha. I'm like an evil villain. Nobody knows my tricks. It's one of the biggest traps that you'll make, okay? And I want to discuss this because actually both men and women are aiding you in falling in this trap. Because you want to know what actually comes with this when you try to realign your state of mind and your regular nature from being a feminine woman to trying to make it more like a masculine man. You end up traumatized. You end up traumatized because you're trying to do like a man does. You're trying to approach sex and the experience of sex like a man does. You are not a man. That's not a bad thing though. It's actually a great thing. You're a woman with your own experiences, your own thoughts, your own way of thinking, your own way of receiving and giving love. You are meant to be different from men. When you see them go about their lives, I'm not saying that it's not wrong for them to do this or that. But when you see them going about their lives a particular way, I don't want you to be envious of their nature. I don't want you to be envious of their approach. And I definitely don't want you changing your approach to be more like men, because you'll only end up being disappointed and traumatized by your own doing. Because as you think you're taking power back by sleeping with men for nothing, you will only down the line realize that they're actually the ones that tricked you out of taking something from you that is a gift. Remember, it's still a gift. Whether you think that you're taking power back or not, it's still a gift. And when you give it to men for nothing and you convince yourself that you're giving it away for nothing because you're empowered to do that, it still makes you feel poopy to realize that someone who you allowed inside you, who's seen you so vulnerable, who got the most vulnerable version of your soul, your spirit, and your being, is someone that doesn't care about you, doesn't remember your name, doesn't maybe even remember sleeping with you because they were so pissed drunk. Or maybe you see them out at the club or the bar or the whatever, and when you come up to them, they pretend like they don't know you. That doesn't feel good. But the problem when you operate under this mindset, the major problem with that is in the process of you feeling things, feeling disappointment, feeling sadness, feeling the trauma, feeling upset at the way that the men that you gave yourself to are now treating you, you will convince yourself that nothing is wrong. And you'll try to, oh, I'm fine. It's whatever. You know, I'm not even upset. It's not even a big, I'm just like the guys. I don't give a damn at all. Like whatever. Like he pretends like he doesn't know me anymore. Whatever. He's talking to a new girl and he's taking her out. It's whatever. Like, doesn't this guy know? Like, it's not that deep. Like, why does everyone think stuff's that deep? It's really not that deep. And this is the problem. Now you're not even giving yourself a license to work through your emotions anymore, because you're convincing yourself that you don't have emotions and you're convincing yourself that you don't feel things. So now you're frustrated, you're emotional, but you're not even allowing yourself the space to be frustrated or emotional. And then you're continuing to do the thing that is traumatizing you while convincing yourself that it's not traumatizing you. And I want you to accept that and understand that, okay, the happiest version of myself is someone that when I do sleep with a man, when I do be that vulnerable and open with a man, I feel safe in doing that. And after I sleep with him, I feel like that same man loves me, cares for me, cherishes me, wants to take care of me, protect and provides for me. And I'm not questioning that in my head. The things that you learn about a guy at the very beginning, we'll just say it, they don't necessarily always align with the things that you're going to learn after, the fact. And when I say after the fact, I just mean over the course of time. So what I want you to understand when it comes to learning and understanding men is there are like two books. And when I say two books, I mean a book, a version of a book that you're going to read on a guy about his life, about who he is, about what he wants, about his intentions, right? What he's looking for, all that good stuff. That is going to be essentially like the fake book. You're going to learn that, you're going to study that. But what I want you to understand is as you keep your leverage, you're going to eventually get to reading this real book. When I say this real book, I mean you're going to get to eventually learning this real version of him. The one that isn't what he told you, it's the version of him that he showed you. So what I want you to understand is the learning process is such a pivotal part, one, to having good sex, which we're actually going to discuss here in the later points, But it's also a very pivotal part to understanding everything that's supposed to be happening in terms of your evaluation process leading up to sex. Because remember, you possess a gift. You possess a gift that men want. They're in hunt for. And remember, just like with any other gift, you're not going to give it away to strangers. That wouldn't make any sense. It's a gift, right? It's important, right? It's valuable, right? So you're evaluating the people around you, the people that are coming close to you, the people that want this gift. You're evaluating who they are, what they're about, how serious they are about those things, and whether they're actually going to be able to act on the things that they say they're about, or whether it's all just talk. So the learning phase is such an important part of sex. You're learning who he is. You're learning how he is, what his approach is to life, what his approach is to relationships. And I never want you to forget something very important, okay? And this is going to kind of lead us into our transition to the darker side of sex here. What I want you to understand about sex, okay? And I'm talking to you as a daughter, but this is a very important part to understand. Sex and your platonic, or let's say non-sexual relationship, will mirror each other. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. A guy who is willing to give you pleasure and likes to see you happy, right? Let's say in a sexual sense, right? He's a really giving guy. He likes to, we're going to be graphic here for those of you who are on the younger side, shouldn't be watching the show, but a guy who likes to, let's say, eat you out. He gets a lot of enjoyment from eating you out, making you climax, putting his fingers in you, getting you all worked up, making you feel good, doing all the things that you like, okay? He's a really big giver. You get to ride on his face, all of that good stuff. See, a guy with that mind state is the same type of guy, see, when we extrapolate that and then we mirror it in a non-sexual sense, is the same type of guy who will be thinking, how do I make my partner happy? In a non-sexual sense. How do I take care of my woman and make sure that her needs are met in our relationship? Because her happiness is also important to me. Vice versa, okay, and some of you might realize this in your own experiences, the guys who are very selfish with sex, in the sense that they're only thinking about their own pleasure. When I say jackrabbit himself inside of you for 90 seconds or less, those are the type of guys who I'm talking about. They don't warm you up. They don't do any foreplay. They're just take your clothes off, stick it in you like that, 90 seconds and gone. You can't even, you're like, you blinked a couple of times and you're like, it's already over? I didn't even realize when we started. You didn't get a chance to warm yourself up. He just treated you like a microwave, like we talk about, right? And this is the thing. Those same men that do sex like this, you can actually extrapolate that. And I guarantee you, in a non-sexual sense, he goes about your relationship the same way. So part of learning someone's personality is also learning about what your experience is going to be with them during sex. Here's another part that I want to discuss with you. I know you're my daughter, but we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here. Your enjoyment and satisfaction is very important in this process. Let's imagine that you want to pass a note to a man. And let's say you're in class with this guy and you want to communicate something to him through this note. Let's just say, for example, you're saying, hey, I just want to let you know that tonight there is a party in Peter Hall, okay? Peter Hall's having a party at 12 a.m. tonight, midnight tonight. Be there or be square. Whatever. That's the note that you want to pass. What I want you to understand, though, and I know it's kind of a funny scenario, in order for you to properly communicate this note to that man, you have to understand what it is you're trying to say in that note. In order to pass it to him, that way he receives it and he understands what that note means and he understands how to take action on that note. So in the example that I gave you where you're giving a guy a note because you want to let him know about a party that's happening in Peter Hall tonight, you have to understand where Peter Hall is. You have to understand timing. You have to understand communication and the English language in order to write that note up, give it to him, that he can then say, oh, okay, party tonight, Peter Hall, I'll be there tonight, I'll bring my friends, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, okay? Now, this might sound very trivial and you're thinking, Tomisin, what does that have to do with enjoyment? I'll tell you what. In order for you to properly communicate to men what pleasure actually is for you, you also have to do some exploring of yourself. Now, I know in this scenario, you're supposed to be my daughter. But like I said, we're going to get graphic. You need to understand, because sex is such an important part of your life and will be such an important part of your romantic relationships, you will suffer. Listen to me. You will suffer in your relationships if you don't understand what enjoyment is for you or what pleasure is for you. Because similar to passing someone a note and communicating something to them through that note, you will not be able to communicate to men what you need and what you want and what is pleasurable for you if you don't even understand what enjoyment is to you. This sounds very trivial, but this can be or can make the experience of sex very, very horrible if you're not careful. Because if you're not focused on understanding what enjoyment is to you, then sex will only and solely become the process of giving this man enjoyment. And you will never ever see it as an experience where you're supposed to enjoy this or like this or find this pleasurable. And some of you might be thinking, well, Tomisin, I like giving my man pleasure. That doesn't bother me. That makes me feel good. But you're also supposed to feel good. And that's the realization that I want you to come to, that the experience is not solely meant to be an experience that only gives a man pleasure. But part of the way you will struggle is if you don't understand how to communicate your own pleasure. So in order for you to know how to communicate your own pleasure, you're going to have to do some experimenting with your own body. I'm not going to get too graphic. You're going to have to touch yourself. You're going to have to explore yourself. You might have to try some things. You might have to talk about some things. You might have to talk to some girlfriends about their own experiences. You might have to open up to some girlfriends of yours just in general and try and explore and see some of the things that you find pleasurable. I know that's a little bit, oh my God, some of you are like, oh my God, that's not very woman-like. I would never do that. Why would I be doing that? But you have to understand this is an important part of your life. The reason I say this is because when you understand what pleasure is to you, you can then communicate that to men. And when you can communicate that to men, you can have a happier sex life as well. If you make the mistake of thinking that sex is all about a man's enjoyment, his pleasure, and what he wants, there will come a point where you start saying to yourself, I will just do anything to make him happy at my own expense and even against my own boundaries. Then at a certain point, what will happen over the course of time is sex will start to bring you shame because you'll be doing things that are either against, your boundaries, your morals, your values, or just what you want. And it'll start to make you feel very, very icky, okay? But the problem is if you start feeling shame, that shame is going to translate. If something on a regular basis makes you feel that negative emotion, you're not going to want to, on an ongoing basis, feel that negative emotion. So then you're going to try and avoid that situation that is leading to that negative emotion. But here's the problem. See, if you're in a relationship and in a romantic relationship with a guy, and every time the topic of sex comes up, you're trying to avoid it, this becomes a very, very slippery slope, right? If you're always in avoidance when it comes to the topic of sex or having sex with your man, right? Assuming he's your man. Now your man's going to become very unhappy, right? Not because you owe him anything, but now the shame that you feel is causing you to avoid this situation. You avoid any foreplay, you avoid any topics on it, you avoid getting close with it, and you're avoiding putting yourself in a position where this could even happen because of the shame that you feel on an ongoing situation. Now, when your man is unhappy, a lot of emotional distance in the relationship, okay? And a lot of times this emotional distance, we can also describe here as ED, not that type of ED, but this type of ED will usually lead to some sort of breakup. It's just inevitable. Be very clear and concise and communicative with your boundaries as well. If you don't feel comfortable with something, be communicative about that. Tell him that you don't feel comfortable with the thing. Don't be so focused on his enjoyment that you don't communicate how you really feel about things, okay? There's a difference between a boundary and, just being something that's a little outside your comfort zone, right? I'm not saying don't be open to trying new things. I'm not saying don't be adventurous or spontaneous, but if you get to a point where you genuinely feel uncomfortable doing something, you have to communicate that. If you don't, your relationship will suffer.